thank you for joining us this evening for the Stormwater Rate Increase Town Hall. This evening, that is exactly what we will be discussing. Here in DeKalb County, we have a proposed stormwater rate increase. We have not had a rate increase in stormwater here in DeKalb since 2004, so it has been almost 20 years. Currently, we have done an assessment, and the proposed assessment is $48. I want to make sure that everyone who is watching understands that, of course, stormwater is assessed annually on your tax bill. It is totally different from your monthly water rate. That said, I am Lorraine Cochran-Johnson. I am the Chair of Public Works and Infrastructure, where I sit alongside Commissioners Ted Terry and Commissioner Robert Patrick. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to him to also bring formal introductions, or shall I say greetings, before we get started tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, and thank you for your leadership as the chair of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. I joined that committee with you when I first came on the board in 2021, and it is 2023. So we are, I guess, in our third year now. It's been really great to work with you over the multitude of issues that Public Works and Infrastructure works on every Tuesday, every other Tuesday, and then we vote the next Tuesday here in this room. And this is another really important topic, so really appreciate the partnership with your team, bringing everyone together to put together this program, all of our speakers today, as well as having the public participate. So looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Absolutely. At this time, before we say anything more, I would like to do an introduction of sorts of those who are sitting here with us this evening. So as the faces appear on the monitor, I will read the name. Of course, you know me. I'm your commissioner, Lorraine Cochran-Johnson. I would assume Commissioner Ted Terry, he's up next, Super District 6. Also joining us this evening, we have our Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Zach Williams, on the panel. Here for moral support, I'm not sure he joined us up front. We should have Mr. David Hayes, and of course, he is in charge of watershed management here in DeKalb County. We also have Miss Maria Hauser, and she is the director of our consent decree. Many of you may be aware that here in DeKalb County, we are under consent decree. We have a program that has been formulated that requires us to expand, enlarge, and increase our water sewer capacity. The program has everything from PSARPs, Priority Sewer Assessment Rehabilitation Areas, to OSARPs. We had experienced a great deal of sanitary sewer overflow because we plain and simply did not have the capacity to process the amount of stormwater that we were experiencing. And also, it's important to talk about the aging infrastructure. I will say that prior to CEO Thurman's administration in 2017, there was no ongoing efforts for ongoing capital improvements. So I'm really happy to have us on track. I won't talk much more about that, but she does a stellar job. And also Mr. Lemke, he is our Director of Public Works. So he is joining us this evening, and I believe that will complete the cast other than Mr. Rich Gruhl. And of course, he is with Arcadis, and Arcadis was responsible for the study that was utilized to determine the amount necessary for the stormwater rate increase. And you'll hear from Rich a little bit later. That being said, I'm now going to turn over the presentation to both COO Williams as well as Miss Maria Hauser. To talk with you about how we got here. They will give you an overview of stormwater at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner, or Madam Chair. First of all, I'm Zach Williams, the Chief Operating Officer for DeKalb County, and I'd like to commend Commissioner Cochran-Johnson as well as Commissioner Terry on their leadership for doing exactly this, bringing us together so that we can talk and have a discussion and really explain what is the county up to. because all too often, there may be decisions made, and, with the right intent, with the right interest, but not giving the citizens an ample opportunity to really hear directly from those who are proposing a decision, as well as the commissioners who ultimately will be voting. In today's conversation, we will be talking about stormwater and the proposed stormwater rates. We will get a presentation from both Director Lemke, Director of Public Works, and Mr. Rich Gruhl from Arcadis. But at the outset, I'd really want to kind of establish, as Commissioner Cochran-Johnson mentioned, back in 2004, the then commissioners saw fit and logically to establish what was a stormwater utility, creating a separate business unit that would be charged with the oversight, management, and maintenance of those stormwater assets. And we'll get into much more detail about that later. And from 2004, really for the next several years through about 2012 or so, I would say that would be the heyday of that business unit. And subsequent to that, between budgetary cuts, mass resignation during the Great Recession, there was a lot of downsizing in that operation, and then there was a certain amount of incorporation, all of that took place. As Commissioner Cochran-Johnson did mention, there have not been any rate adjustments since 2004. So if you picture back in 2004, what, the cost of whether it's a gallon of gas, a gallon of milk, a dozen eggs, whatever, and look at where it is now, doubled and tripled at least, it becomes extremely difficult to continue an operation that is constrained in that way. What we'd like to be able to share with you today is how it is the county would anticipate spending or investing, quite frankly, any increase that would be allocated. And so as we are proposing an increase, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson mentioned that on your tax bill, that is a separate levy. Currently, that levy is $48, generally speaking, $48, and it would be going up to $96. That sounds like, a lot in terms of by percentage, but if you look at, a gallon of gas costing $1.51 and 20 years ago and costing $3.50 or something like that, you understand why the decision needs to be made and the cost of materials and such. A brief overview of the system, and they'll go into much more detail when it's time to present. But there's over 600 miles of infrastructure, pipes specifically, that are carrying water, rainfall, through the system, and our goal is to shore up those pipes. A lot of that corrugated metal over time has collapsed, and which ultimately causes not only flooding, but road failures and the like. 25,000 catch basins, 175 miles of roadside ditches, detention ponds and such. So it's a very large and complex system, and it requires care and feeding that, quite frankly, over the past 20 years, we have, over time, just not been able to keep up with. So that's what today's conversation is requesting an increased investment so that we can ensure that we maintain the system in a way that you would expect. That's generally a quick overview of the system. And Madam Chair, we can actually have Director Hauser, if you like, do a quick introduction or turn over to the team.
Absolutely. I would say that Ms. Hauser has been integral to not only the consent decree, but helping us move forward, particularly as it relates to all things water. So at this time, feel free to share any comments that you'd like to help everyone understand the current condition of our stormwater and how we got here and how we're sort of moving forward.
So hello, everyone. My name is Maria Hauser. I was previously introduced. I am the Director of Environmental Compliance for the county, as well as the consent decree, as Commissioner Cochran-Johnson mentioned. I also have responsibilities for directing the capital improvement program for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. So today you're going to hear a lot about water, and I just want to make sure that I impress on you that there is a different system for managing the drinking water we get in our homes. There are potable water that we utilize to cook, to bathe, to, produce ice in our refrigerators. And that is one system. You get your bills for that system on a monthly basis now. There's also the wastewater system, also known as the sewer system. And that, similarly to the water system, comprises of miles and miles of pipe throughout DeKalb County. And finally, this is the topic of our discussion today, is the stormwater system. So it's raining outside right now, and as you walk through the parking lot, you saw puddles or rivulets flowing to the storm drains, and that eventually goes to the waters of our state, to our riverways, etc. And the whole purpose of having a stormwater management system, really, it's to control and to ensure we do not have a lot of flooding. We are managing our water resources every time it rains. And really, I know everybody around here probably has heard out of sight, out of mind. Well, all of our water systems have been out of sight because a lot of times they're under the ground, so you don't see them a lot. So over the past numerous decades, we have, as a county, not provided the amount of investment that is needed to maintain the system. And of course, as Zach alluded to, not having a rate increase for 19 years and utilizing the same amount of money, you don't have the investment in resources as we need to. But the great news is we have an opportunity today to lean in together so we could continue to build DeKalb County without having something foundational as managing our water resources, being stormwater. It makes it difficult for us to continue to grow and thrive as a county. So we have this great opportunity now. It's pretty pivotal for us to actually invest in our system to continue having a safe, manageable stormwater system. So I think we're going to get into it.
Absolutely. And I couldn't have said it better. As it relates to stormwater, many of you, I, on a weekly basis, receive calls from individuals that have stormwater concerns at their personal homes and residences. And I would like to say, take this point of privilege, that DeKalb County recently, out of an abundance of concern from individuals who have reached out, we have a program so that we can work with homeowners, because increasingly we are finding the need, and oftentimes these repairs and, shall I say, moderations to drainage systems are high dollar items, but it is absolutely necessary. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the conversation to Mr. Gruhl and also Mr. Lemke, and they will make a formal presentation on stormwater.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate the introduction. Again, I'm Rick Lemke. I'm the Public Works Director, and part of my responsibility is to oversee the operations of various departments within the city, including fleet, transportation, sanitation, and roads and drainage. The roads and drainage section is the area of the county that has maintenance responsibilities for the stormwater system that we've been talking about. And as it has been indicated, it's an interesting process to go through a stormwater management system. Unlike your water systems or your sanitary sewer systems, stormwater is not something that you use every day. It's raining right now, and the system certainly gets into use now. So it's very often easy to forget that there is a stormwater system. It does not rise to everyone's front of their minds all the time, unless we have situations like today where it's raining. So what I wanted to do is provide very similar or virtually the same type of presentation that I gave to the commission last week in the Board of Commission meeting, just to provide the information and the updates, for everyone, so that we can move forward. And what I'll try to do, perfect. What I'll try to do is go through the current operations that we have in the stormwater system, what some of our financial history has been, and then Mr. Gruhl will go into some of our needs and pretty much be examining where we want to go in the future. Just a brief summary, the stormwater utility is operated, as I indicated, by the Roads and Drainage Division. It provides stormwater management within the service area, and that service area is all of unincorporated DeKalb County, plus the cities of Stonecrest and Tucker. However, Tucker had a referendum in November where they have elected to take over maintenance responsibilities for their stormwater system, and that will go into effect in July 1st. The entire utility operation is funded by the fees that are collected. It is from developed properties within the service area. The stormwater utility, it has been alluded to, was created actually in 2003 and went into operation in 2004, and the fees have not changed since the inception of the utility. So it's been 20 years. The rates have remained static since the inception, as I just indicated. And this is the types of things that we need to take care of, that we are responsible for. CEO Williams talked about some of this already, but we have over 35,000 feet of pipe to maintain. Of that 35,000 feet of pipe, about 2/3 of it is corrugated metal. And the slide that's up there on right now indicates that corrugated metal pipes generally have a life expectancy of a range between 15 and 40 years. Here in DeKalb County, I tend to believe that is a little ambitious when you start talking about 40 years. I think it's closer to that 15 years. And the reason why I believe that is courtesy of a study that was done in our neighboring county in Gwinnett that had to do with corrugated metal pipes versus aluminized metal pipe. And the conclusion was that the acidic soils that are in the area impact the corrugated metal pipes to a great degree. And I know that, this is not Gwinnett County, but I'm sure the soils are not significantly different between the two counties. There was a recommendation that corrugated metal pipes are suitable in areas where you've got a pH of 6 and higher. But the soil conditions here in these two counties are generally average between 5 and 6. So we've actually got a lower pH, higher acidity in the soils, and that impacts the pipes. As a result, we end up with a lot more corrosion, and those pipes don't last quite as long as we would like them to. And that being said, we've got through the studies that we've done so far, the average age of our infrastructure, the average age of the pipes that we have is over 30 years. So we've got, quite a bit of pipe in the ground that has either already failed or is certainly nearing the end of its ability to function the way it should. CEO Williams also indicated we got 25,000 catch basins and inlets that we maintain. There's over 1,000 detention ponds that the system maintains. We have a number of dams that are included in the stormwater utility for maintenance activities. We also have bridges, and it would seem like why is a bridge included in the stormwater utility? Well, we do a lot of the maintenance on the bridges that are over waterways, and that's where the connection lies, is between those types of bridges and those types of structures that span a waterway or enable a waterway to continue to flow. So we do worry about that as well. And then, of course, we have roadside ditches that are maintained on the side of about 175 miles worth of roadway. Our resources right now that we have to do all that maintenance is somewhat limited. And this slide is giving information pretty much at the end of year 2022. And at that time, we had 104 positions that were funded within the stormwater utility. Regrettably or unfortunately, due to various things, COVID amongst them, we only had about 73 of those positions filled at the end of the year, leaving us with 30 positions that were vacant, or about a 30% vacancy rate. Now, that has certainly increased and has gotten much better since then, but it does give you a little bit of an idea of the kind of problems that we had as a utility trying to maintain our system. It's pretty hard to do a complete job when you're only working with 70% workforce. We have, as I said, we've worked on that. Some of the recent activities by the county to raise minimum wage, for example, has assisted us in attracting more people into the field and hopefully retaining them as well. We have on-call, or had at the end of 2022, we had on-call resources in contractual activities. We had 2 contractors to help us out with pipe repairs, and we had 2 contracts to help us with pipe lining, where we can actually go inside the pipe and put a lining inside the pipe rather than having to dig it up to do the repairs. So those contractors helped us tremendously. The actual activities that we did in 2022 are shown here, that we ended up with about 2,500 requests for service throughout the year. And that's pretty much average. That's pretty much the average that we see every year coming into our offices. 2,500 phone calls, emails, messages, requests for assistance, and requests for us to examine something. Of those, we end up developing work orders. We were only able to accomplish 900 of those and complete 900 of those in 2022. And that's down a little bit from the average, and again, down because of that vacancy rate that you saw in that previous slide. Our normal average prior to the pandemic was that we would complete about 1,200 work orders each year. Now, still, that's much better than only 900, but it's still far less than the number of service requests that we receive. And as a result, you can see that it's just a downward spiral that we just can't keep up. The types of work orders that we receive and that we actually completed are listed there in that chart. Generally, it's catch basin cleaning, pipe repairs, curb repairs, all sorts of activities that are related to handling the stormwater system. We have still a lot of ongoing activities and efforts, initiatives that we're trying to proceed to give us a way out of this. And one of those first things is the Stormwater Master Plan that has been already initiated, currently under development. I expect or anticipate that we'll see completion of that later on this year. And that's a long needed element of the stormwater system. The county has never really proceeded with a master plan for its stormwater systems, prior to this. Mm-hmm. And, we're looking at this from, so to speak, the 10,000 foot level. We can't really dig into minuscule details at this level, but we will as this plan moves forward. Once we get this plan completed, it will show us and be able to tell us where we need to start directing our efforts, where we need to drill down and find, and direct our attention to more specific areas. We also have implemented CityWorks as a management program. It's a maintenance management system. It is currently underway. It's a system that Roads and Drainage had not been able to use before. We were using instead everything from multiple spreadsheets to call systems to several different areas where, if we were looking for information, we would have to pull from 2, 3, and sometimes even 4 resources to be able to find out exactly what's the story is with any particular problem. CityWorks enables us to meld all that stuff together into one location, and it gives us the ability to do a much better job of determining what we have done in the past, what we need to do in the future, and how to keep records of where it is going so that we know exactly what our costs are, what our requirements are to do those things. We also added in 2023 already 2 additional maintenance contracts. I indicated in the previous slide that we had 2 contractors to do pipe repair. Now we have 4. That certainly is going to help us quite a bit. Those contracts were made possible with the use of the ARP funding that came from the feds. We also have additional short-term initiatives that we're looking at, trying to expand and obtain grant funding and loan funding to help us address a lot of these long-standing issues, the backlog of projects that has been developed because we can't keep up with the service requests. So we're looking at GEFA funding, that's Georgia Environmental Funding Agency, I think. Trying to get money for doing some of these backlogged work orders. But in order to get a loan, as you would a car payment, you got to be able to show that you can pay it back. And that's something that's very important for us right now, that we need to be able to show through the stormwater utility fees that we have sufficient funds that we can repay any kind of a loan that we would get in order to accelerate our ability to handle this backlog. We're also looking at a program from the Core Water Infrastructure Financing Program. It's known as SWIFT-B for repairing dams. Dam repair tends to be very expensive. This is a program that is more specifically targeted to your, larger, hydroelectric type dams. But we believe, and we're trying to assemble a grouping of some of the dams that we have throughout the county to be able to qualify for this particular program. The financial history of basically the last 6 years going back is shown here on this slide. Our revenues generally coming in from the stormwater utility have averaged about $14.8 million each year. There's a little bit of a jump in there in 2019, which was courtesy of a transfer of funds for vehicle replacement. The expenditures, on the other hand, through the same time period, is averaging between 17 and 18 million. So it exceeds the amount of revenue that we have been able to receive. Mm-hmm. And the revenue versus expenditure is shown in that last column, and obviously there's a lot of red there, showing that we've been expending and trying to expend more money than what we're bringing in. And the way we were able to do that is that we were able to use fund balance that we had to fund the expenditures. And
I'm just going to pop in here because I want people that are joining this conversation to understand that as responsible elected officials, we must run DeKalb as we do our homes. When you operate in the red, it cannot continue. You have to determine ways to fill the gap for needed revenue. And as you can see, that since 2017, DeKalb County has operated in the red. Our expenditures have exceeded our revenue intake. And again, I go back to the fact that we have not considered or had a stormwater rate increase in almost 20 years since 2004. I also noticed too, we didn't have the WIFIA loans up there. Are those not covered under?
Those were generally
just the GEFA?
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. And certainly, one of the other adds that I would make to those comments is that, we're spending more than we're taking in, yet we still can't keep up with the demand. And that's the other reason why we've gone through this. And this is probably one of the slides that a lot of people are going to be interested is why now? Why are we finally, getting around to looking at this? Well, as indicated, our reserves are depleted. We don't have the ability anymore to fall back and utilize fund reserves because they're not there. They're gone. They've been spent. The costs for stormwater utility maintenance have increased, as anything else has increased over the last 20 years. We've got labor costs that have increased. We've got salaries that have increased, insurance costs, materials costs, even availability of materials has been changed dramatically in the last 20 years. Heck, even in the last few years, we've seen, and anybody can look that's gone grocery shopping, take a look at your grocery bill and see what it was, years ago versus what it is now for buying the same things. The rate of failures, sinkholes, collapsed pipes is becoming more and more frequent, and that's a product of an infrastructure that's getting old. Things just don't last as long as they do. The average age is at or approaching its useful life expectancy. Like all of us, the days go by, we all get older, and I know in my case, I tend to get a little slower. So it's, a lot of that is just a natural phenomena that you got to think about with any of your infrastructure needs, and stormwater is no exception. Deferring our maintenance any more than what it already has is likely going to result in increased and more severe failures. We're already seeing things like what's shown on this picture that's on the slide is this is a washout. Well, it's not just a washout that affects stormwater. This is a washout that affects a roadway. It's a washout that affects utilities, gas lines, telecommunication lines, water lines, sanitary sewer, and even more importantly, and I'm not sure that you can see it very clearly, but there's a street sign that has collapsed into that hole as well, and that street sign says no outlet. Well, if that roadway washes out completely, and this is the only way in and out of a subdivision, now I'm talking about isolating people from emergency services, from being able to get to and from work. So it's not just a matter of a little bit of a flooding problem or a little bit of a washout on a road because we've got a collapsed storm sewer. These are things that affect the entire community, and that's why it's so critically important for us to address this. Our maintenance backlog continues to grow, as I said, simply because we just plain don't have the resources to keep up with what's happening. The expenses and the costs are getting greater. The pipe collapses are getting more frequent, more severe, and that is taking us deeper into the hole. If we do not address our stormwater fees, we're going to have to develop some alternate funding from someplace. We just simply cannot continue on the path that we are on right now. So with that, I'm going to let Mr. Gruhl take over. He can address a lot of the moving forward expenses. I drew the short straw, so I get to talk about the stuff that went bad. Rich gets to talk about the stuff that's going to get better.
All right, thank you, Rick. What you're seeing here on this slide is the FY23 budget on the left that was passed by the commission a few weeks back, maybe a month or so ago. And it's consistent about with what they've been spending. So this isn't talking about adding stuff here. We're just talking about what they've been doing. And then we inflated the rates moving forward. And so you can see with inflation how, prices and costs will continue to increase. The line that you see kind of going across those bars is the amount of revenue that was collected in 2022. And so you can see that expenses without doing anything are clearly higher than the proposed revenues with a no action alternative. All right. So Rick kind of talked about the stormwater program as it currently exists, and we're moving into what we're hoping to move the needle a little bit here in the next few years. This is kind of a stormwater program areas that we talk about, and basically think of them as kind of buckets of activities. The bucket on the left is routine maintenance. Those are routine activities that we would like to be able to do, routine catch basin cleanings and maintaining detention ponds. And the best way to think about this is think about your home, the things that you do frequently and you plan for. So you're going to go out and mow your lawn every week and a half, whatever have you. You're going to take out the trash. These are things that you do every day. That's where we want to get to is start getting to a place where we can do some of the maintenance on a programmed routine basis. So for example, let's say if you only mowed your lawn every 3 years, you can imagine it's going to take you a lot longer to mow your lawn that first time than it was than if you do it every week during the summer. So that's what we're trying to get to is more routine, preventative, predictive maintenance. The next bucket is corrective maintenance. That's where we're living currently right now, and that's reactive. These are not huge projects for the most part. These are going to be a sinkhole form. They've got to go out and react to it and go out and fix that. So we're talking about pipe repair. We're talking about emergency repair, sinkholes, catch basins that have become clogged. They've got to go unclog them so that we can reduce localized flooding, ditch cleaning, bridge maintenance, pipelining. These are things that as they find issues, they try to react to them and go and correct them. The next bucket is capital improvements. Think of these as your bigger projects. Like you hear about whole systems being created or whole systems being replaced. These are the big ticket items. These are not, $50,000, $20,000, $1,000 jobs. These are going to be potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then finally, the last bucket that the division has to spend a good bit of time on is regulatory compliance. As part of the Clean Water Act that was passed back in the 70s and is amended, has the MS4 program, which stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permits. And DeKalb County is required to comply with that. And there's a whole myriad of items that they have to do every year to show compliance with that and then provide a report to EPD, documented that they did meet their regulatory compliance. So these are kind of the major buckets, if you will, funding buckets that your average program tries to operate under. All right, so as we start to move forward and we talk about funding needs, we've tried to break them up into immediate needs and then kind of shorter term needs. This is a relatively short term planning horizon for what we're talking about tonight. But the immediate needs, kind of this year, these are the things that we need this year, is we need to fully fund the program or find alternative funding there. As Rick alluded to earlier, all the spending in the red over the last few years has depleted the reserves. So if we were to have a major failure, there is really no money there to go out and do a fix. So, and usually what I tell most folks is, think about if a hurricane comes through, it's going to expose some pretty big weak points in the system, and those are going to need to be repaired. And typically there's a funding reserve that can be pulled from to address those. And then the other major item that needs to be addressed, just because we can't get proactive if we're trying to catch up, is to address the current work order backlog. So those are kind of the needs for this year, if you will, for funding. Moving forward in the planning horizon again, the 5-year planning horizon, we'd like to add a new pipe repair work crew. We'd like to get some additional assistance with catch basin cleanings and repairs via contract. We'd like to add some assessment tools. Right now, the county's inspection program, while it is significant, I'm not gonna say it's not significant. It's still a surface level inspection. So if you think about it, they go out and pull a manhole lid. What they can expect is what they can see from the surface. They can't do a lot of confined space entry to go in here and actually look at the pipes that are going underground. And so what we would like to do is see some additional capabilities added to go in and look in those pipes via CCTV, via robots, or via pole cameras, things of that nature. We'd like to see, again, we talked about 1,000 ponds. They're just not able to keep up on a routine maintenance with that. So we'd like to add another pond maintenance crew there to help with some of that. And then kind of moving much later into the planning horizon, start looking at getting more proactive and looking at future system improvements, try to get ahead of these failures. So what does that mean? Again, eliminate the reserve spending, fully fund the program. We've targeted with the models that we've developed, establishing about a $10 million CIP reserve over the next 5 years, with most of that coming in the first 2 to 3 years. Addressing the current backlog, I think the vision right now is to secure a GFA loan that Rick alluded to earlier, and contract out some of those so that the current crews can get a little more proactive and go out there and get ahead of it, while we allow these contractors to go out and address some of these backlogged work orders. Again, add that pipe repair crew on, try to knock out an additional 20 to 30 work orders, which on the pipe repair type work orders. beyond what they are currently doing. So I think last year they did about 60, 70, somewhere in that neighborhood work orders. So this would be in addition, taking it up to 100 a year. More catch basins, again, hiring a contractor to provide another 200 to 250. A lot of times when you see minor street flooding, a lot of times it's a clogged catch basin. And, allowing this contract to go out and address that. I just talked about the CCTV and actually trying to identify these pipes before they collapse. And then beginning to program those works, add another pond crew. Again, I was kind of alluding to that. If you only mowed your yard once every 3 years, you think about how hard it would be. If we can get out and hit these ponds more frequently, then they become more effective at moving quicker. So that's what we're talking about there. Again, moving down the road in later years, shifting some of that CIP reserve to proactive renewals. And then finally, some of the other, and these are smaller initiatives, but talking about looking at some green infrastructure retrofit improvements. To be honest, there's 1,000 ponds out there. I don't know as there's a engineering study that shows how effective those ponds are. What we may go out there and find is that some of the ponds aren't effective and that they could be used for water quality improvements or taken offline. And so that would come a little bit later. But we would like to try to move forward with that as far as a pilot program and just show that what can be done. We've talked about partnering with the school system, with the Green Schoolyards Initiative, and then other BMP initiatives as well. All right, so let's talk about the rate model just a little bit. Again, this is a short-term planning horizon. It's only designed to look at 2023 through 2027. We're not talking about doing any changes to the rate structure as part of this effort. So if you are billed $48 a year now, it'd be a flat rate. Moving forward, it'll be a flat rate. It'll just be a different rate. Condos, townhomes, things of that nature are billed half an ERU. So if a home currently pays 48, you're currently paying 24 if you live in a townhome. And then finally, a non-residential, so think like Walmart, the Walmart parking lot, things of that nature, they pay an equivalent fee based on how many equivalent homes they are. So if they're 10 times the size of an average home from an impervious surface area, they're going to pay 10 times that rate. So the service area, moving forward, as Rick alluded to earlier, Tucker last year decided to take on Stormwater as part of their service delivery. And so this only envisions DeKalb County and Stonecrest addressing stormwater, and that's being worked out, I believe, as part of the intergovernmental agreement. And then finally, it's a stepped rate increase proposed under this proposal, where we go from $48 a year currently, which was what last year was, to $96 this year, add another $12 next year, and then another $12 the year after, and then stay static during this time period. And so that's what you're seeing here. This is the blue is, again, that's similar to the slide that I showed you earlier with the kind of the existing program, if you will, costs. The orange shows, if you add up all those things that we talked about adding to the program, that's what the orange shows. So it's the blue plus the orange. That gives you the total proposed spending. And then the dashed lines up top show you where the revenues would be based on the proposed rates. So as you can see, we're just stepping that up. As the costs increase, we're stepping the rate up, so it's not all at once. And then again, the red dash line is where we are currently based on last year's rates. And then finally, this slide, all this is meant to show is, you may have noticed in the previous slide, there was a little bit of a gap between the spending and the dash line, and there was a little bit of a space in there. And that's just to establish a little bit of a reserve. As Rick mentioned, the reserves have been depleted, and we're just trying to add a little bit of reserve back in beyond what we've talked about earlier. I realize this is too small to see, but this is the model and how we looked at revenues and expenses and what have you. And then this is, I believe this is the last slide. This is the question that always gets asked, how does this compare to what other folks are planning? And you can see there different communities, some in DeKalb County, some are not. The red number towards the bottom, I think it's the fourth line up, that's the rate that was charged last year. Then as you move up, you can see the first green line, that's the proposed rate for this year. And then the two green lines up a little bit higher, the the proposed step-ups in future years. So you can see what we're planning on is getting up to about 120, which is about where Chamblee is right now. Rockdale's a little bit below that. We're talking about stepping up to that in a couple of years. So, and with that, I believe, yep,
And
go ahead.
I would say let's take a careful look at these numbers, because of course, you know, being a super district commissioner, when I send out things, I send them to everyone who is a part of my mailing list. But of course, not every issue that affects the county affects every municipality or city. Again, for the record, I want to state that this proposed rate increase affects the city of Stonecrest. And of course, the city of Tucker has voted to take control of their stormwater. So moving forward, they will be setting their own rates. But at this moment, because the full transfer has not occurred, I believe that's correct. Is that correct, COO Williams?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
At this point, I will say for the record, it would continue to affect them until which time a full transfer of responsibility takes place. So I want you to understand that at $48, you can see that we were far lower than our surrounding municipalities, with the exception, of course, of Stone Mountain and City of Lithonia. Clarkston is at $64. Just for the sake of comparison by county, Gwinnett County is at $73.80. Dunwoody is at $89.51. Brookhaven is at $94. Of course, DeKalb County proposed takes us from 48 to 96. And Pine Lake is currently at $100. Rockdale County is at 102. Of course, we also include our 2004 and 2005 numbers. Chamblee is at 120. Avondale Estates is at 180 for stormwater. And Decatur is at $285. That is their annual assessment rates that you're seeing. So I'm really glad that that slide was included, because I want you to understand exactly where we are, and also understand that there has not in the county been an incremental price increase over time. We are just making for some it may seem like a leap, but it's not our intent to move out of order, but it has absolutely become necessary. Today, you see the documents that we see when we're making these decisions. You see the red line deficit that we are attempting to correct as need continues to improve. One of the things that Mr. Lemke didn't say about the amount of calls that we receive for servicing annually, 2,500 average, that number does include both issues that are related to the county and some that are not. I also want to point out that I believe it was last year, Commissioner Terry, and of course, COO Williams and Ms. Hauser, you all are always there with me. We actually instituted or funded a stormwater master plan. And those findings are due back to us as a county later this year during the fall. And that stormwater master plan was a direct result of the increased demand that we're receiving for stormwater services in DeKalb County. So there has to be a great deal of education with what we're seeing, so that residents fully understand how these issues present themselves. Also, how have we, some people may say, continued to move forward if we're operating at a deficit? And I know sometimes as elected officials, we use terms that only we know. And here this evening, you have heard the term reserve spending. When we talk about reserves, for many years, DeKalb County operated at a structural deficit. But we now have over $110 million in our rainy day fund. And as a government, in order for us to be healthy, we should have in reserve at all time, ideally, a minimum of 2 months operating budget. Is that correct, COO Williams?
Yes, ma'am, and that's what we have.
Absolutely, we do. So I listen very carefully, and it's our responsibility to ensure that we operate a fiscally responsible local government. And that fund balance, that reserve, is what has kept us moving forward since 2017 with a deficit. So I'm not here to do anything besides give you the facts of what the matter is. And I had one other note here, but it was really concerning our catch basins, the increasing need for stormwater and retention and detention ponds to be cut back, and needing to bring online personnel. Now, the one thing that I didn't see, and I'm putting on my PWI hat at this moment, that I would have liked to have seen was us add all the numbers that were associated with the work to be done, so that individuals here understand where we are even after receiving the money, that we are not going to the bank, so to speak. We are covering the cost of good repair and maintenance. And at this time, I know that we have received questions, but I'm going to open it up to the panel to make any other comments that they deem necessary before I go into the questions. And your timing is perfect. I've never been right on the dot. It's not 7 o'clock and you're done good.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the presentation from Director Lemke and Rich here at Arcadis. Been great to work with y'all over the last year as we began to work on the Stormwater Master Plan, and it is underway, and also these discussions with the rate increases. I wanted to highlight a couple things in the presentation. So one, I definitely am interested and have gotten lots of questions about the green infrastructure aspect of what is being proposed. And so I think what Rich pointed out was we have several partnerships and pilot programs that we'll be working on this year and into future years as these funds are raised. And so number one, I'll highlight the Green Schoolyards program. There's a substitute coming to the Board of Commissioners supported by a majority of the Board of Commissioners on Tuesday, tomorrow, that will institute a $350,000 annual fund to be used for several things. One, to support the Green Schoolyards program, which we can talk about later if folks are interested in. Stormwater projects on school properties, and this is as a result of we have a lot of schools that are in neighborhoods, and sometimes those stormwater investments can be a partnership between the school system and the county. Of course, the school system pays stormwater fees, and so when we talk about the non-residential rates, they will be paying an increase as well. And so this is an investment back into our school programs. And then finally, really supporting the work that the Public Works Department has already been doing over the various years, and that is education. That is part of, I believe it's part of the permit, I think it's one of the regulations that come and requirements with the Stormwater Utility Fund, is that's to educate the public. And so whether it's doing brochures, pamphlets, flyers, billboards, or programming within the schools. And so this is a really exciting opportunity because we've actually been talking with the school system, with their science curriculum director, as well as several neighborhood leaders who want to see some green schoolyards and rain gardens and bioretention projects on site in schools. I'm thinking about one in particular, Columbia Elementary, where there's this sort of kind of this sloping part of the property. There's a creek that goes through it. I think it's Shoal Creek. And so the neighborhood group over the last year has cleaned up the creek. They've been doing some programs with the science teacher at Columbia Elementary. And so they have already budgeted out about a $50,000 rain garden that would have signage and that also would involve the curriculum. And so we can be working with the schools, for instance, to educate our young people about green infrastructure, why rain gardens and bioretention, as Rich mentioned, can support water quality and not just the water quantity. I think a lot of the things that is being discussed here has a lot to do with volume and water quantity, but water quality is another important aspect of that, because as Maria pointed out, this water either will eventually flow to a watershed, a creek into either South River or the Chattahoochee or Flint in a little bit, or might just be sort of retained in a detention pond that might overflow and it might just soak back into the ground. And so, as Rich also pointed out, our intentions this year are to pile out a few bioretention ponds. So those 1,000+ detention ponds, sometimes they just got weeds growing everywhere. The best approach probably for the time being is to just bush hog them. But in some cases, there might be an opportunity in some areas to sort of scrub and then replant certain types of plants that can add more water quality, support wildlife, and the overall ecology of our water systems. I did want to just, we heard it raining earlier. The thing that is, in my mind, really pressing about this investment that we're making is that we know that climate change is happening. We know that we have been hearing from a lot of y'all, as well as neighbors around the county, that have experienced really bad flooding when it really, really rains. And there's really no end in sight to that. All of the climate scientists, other than just our own two eyes, are telling us that the rainfall, sometimes the torrential rainfalls that come, whether because of a hurricane or just a spring shower, sometimes can be really, really heavy rain. And so we need to make sure that our infrastructure can be more resilient in the face of a changing climate, which means sometimes it'll be a lot drier, sometimes it's going to be a lot wetter. And so these investments are going to be really important to protect our neighborhoods from severe flooding and then support the overall ecology. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you for those words. And this sort of segues in perfectly. I believe there may have been some questions. If they are, please go ahead and bring them over to the table. I am going to start with questions, and I encourage the entire panel to join in on answering. The first question, Commissioner Terry, is in line with what you just said, and it comes from Miss Kimberly Jackson. She said, I live in a townhome community with a storm drain in the center of my backyard. When it rains, water from all units drain downward towards the backyard, thereby causing a major loss of yard down the storm drain. Who is responsible for replacing the yard, the dirt, that no longer flushes with the concrete slab? The homeowner or the county? Who do you think? The homeowner. Increasingly, what we're seeing due to the torrential rain that Commissioner Terry just spoke about is that infrastructure that was once adequate ain't adequate anymore. So, as we see these torrential downfalls, we are seeing erosion of soil. We're also seeing more and more water retention that is in backyards and that is running down, in yards. And that is not the county's responsibility. I have even gone out and walked with some neighbors because it is a huge problem. And of course, what was once sufficient, it just doesn't work anymore. But I do want us to speak to COO Williams. I want us to speak to the fact that we do have options and opportunities to assist residents who may be in need. I know that we do have, I think it's called RIP Rack or RAP Rock.
Yes, just the rock and pipe program. Mr. Limke can speak to it. But at the end of the day, Madam Chair, there are opportunities for individual homeowners who have situations where they have had constant flooding from stormwater, where they can call the county and have delivered actually a certain amount of pipe and rock. Then you're going to have your own either landscape engineer or professional to assist in the install. But we do provide the resources to assist homeowners in addressing that issue.
Yes, and those two tools can be very valuable in helping to mitigate, reroute, and diminish stormwater runoff. So with that being said, for those who may be listening, I would say to you to just reach out to your county commissioner. And of course, we should all know who to contact to get you on the list if you are in need of a rock and some form of remediation to sort of help diminish stormwater runoff. Mr. Lemke, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just provide you with a couple of more details on that. It's called the Citizen Drainage Program. And through that program, the county can provide up to $2,500 in value of the rock or of pipe to, the resident, if there's certain qualifications met. And those qualifications generally are dependent upon the location of the property with respect to the floodplain. If a property is fully within the floodplain, we really can't provide that rock or that pipe. But nonetheless, in many properties, we are able to do that. And we're, more than happy to try and, provide that kind of assistance. So if anybody has that need, then, they can call and request to be put on that list for the Citizen Drainage Program.
And the telephone number is 404-297-3840.
And I'm going to ask you to repeat that and make sure you speak with your loud voice, Mr.
The
Williams.
telephone number for those interested in the program is 404-297-3840.
Okay, and I'm going to go to the next question. And this particular question comes from Mrs. Carolyn Canty. And her question is, has there been an assessment as to why DeKalb County experiences a higher than standard water loss? And if so, what are the root causes for the losses, and exactly what will be done to prevent repeating pipe failures at the same point of loss?
Okay, and so I did see Director Hayes join us, and as we're aware that this question, an excellent question, is dealing with our water system, not our stormwater, but our water system. And so it's your drinking, yes, I guess we have three water, your drinking water is the nature of the question. So Mr. Hayes, would you like to take a stab at that?
And let me say that, I've really become aware, and that's why I wanted to make sure everyone understood the distinction, that we are increasing your stormwater rate, which is an annual assessment, and not your water rate, because there is confusion. Because when residents hear water, water is water. But it's not quite water is water here tonight. We want to make sure we keep it separate, but this is still a very valid question. Because it would take us going far, far back to explain how we got here and why we're under a consent decree. It's because over several decades, we've not done what we ought. And I do give credit where it's due. It's under the administration of CEO Mike Thurman that we made the changes and turned the corner. But of course, the EPA was standing at the other corner to see us and usher us along the way. So it was with, I would say, some guidance. And Mr. Hayes, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good evening, everyone, and then my apologies for being a little tardy. I was dealing with water as it was raining outside. The question is, have we had an assessment? Yes. Just as all infrastructure that was spoken about earlier, out of sight, out of mind is the pipe system, and DeKalb County has reached its 200-year mark in 2022. We have pipe in the ground that is of 70 to 80 years of age. And there's oftentimes the life expectancy of pipe to be just around 50 years of age. What we've done, what we're doing, Watershed has completed a watershed master plan for the pipes in DeKalb County. And what that says, what that means is we've gone out and we've assessed the pipes to understand the conditions of the pipes, the size of the pipes, and to know if those pipes are of substantial size to deliver the demand that's required by the constituents and businesses throughout DeKalb County. We got that information, we analyzed it, and then we put together a plan to correct what was in that master plan report. That being said, part of this $2.4 billion that was approved for CIP is that plan to repair, replace, and upsize these pipes to prevent breaks and failures, to deliver more quantities of water to the areas that need, and to help us with reliability and give you the service that you so deserve and pay for with your rates.
Thank you so much. I was just overwhelmed with all the cards that we received. So we're sitting here attempting to catalog so that hopefully we can answer a group of questions through one response. I am going to go ahead again from the list that I currently have that was submitted from people that are online and watching remotely. And this question again is water related, but it says, how has the accelerate growth of businesses and household impacted the volume managed by DeKalb's stormwater system? Are there plans to control growth in areas where the water management system is inadequate to support additional water intake? And Ms. Hauser, I think this one is a great one for you, but absolutely. Because we are under a consent decree, we do not have the ability to bring even certain businesses online at this moment because we simply do not have the water sewer capacity. That is not something that we talk about often, but we do have a CAP program that allows us to bring online additional businesses as we increase water sewer capacity. And we have also been able, because there are businesses, and let me say to everyone watching, there is no lack of interest in development in DeKalb County. In some instances, we simply have a lack of infrastructure that facilitates growth. Be very clear on that. With our CAP program and some businesses that want to come online, we have been able to share the cost 50-50 with them. So we're able to have them invest in our infrastructure to bring their programs online here in the county. So I'm going to turn this one over to you, Ms. Hauser, now that I've had my say.
Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, there are 3 different systems. The stormwater system, which of course is the focus for today because those rates are the ones that we're tackling right now. The wastewater system or the sewer system, and the drinking water system. For development to occur in our neighborhoods, as we may want additional groceries, additional retail, housing, we need to have capacity for each one: drinking water, wastewater or sewage, and in the stormwater arena. In the stormwater perspective, that goes through part of our planning department. There are restrictions. There are things that have to be done. They are reviewed by our engineers, and we have, of course, our director here. Peggy is sitting right at the front there. She sees a lot of the new development that's coming on in the stormwater area. Similarly, as Commissioner Cochran-Johnson mentioned, in the wastewater section, we are mandated by the Environmental Protection Agency, the feds, and the state of Georgia, as well as to how we could allow additional connections to the system. And similarly, for the drinking water system, we want to make sure that there's an adequate supply and pressure of drinking water available anytime development occurs. But there are rules and regulations regarding the evaluation for each water system to determine whether we could accept additional development and how that development is integrated into the existing system. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and thank you, Maria. That's a great description. And I'll just add another layer to this that I think is related to what Carolyn had asked in her question about growth. And I know we got some members of the community council here, or folks who may have been to a neighborhood meeting when the commissioners are dealing with a rezone application or a special land use permit, or maybe have noticed in their neighborhood that once wooded lot is now being clear cut, and now there's homes going up or other type of development. And this is an aspect of growth, because one of the greatest stormwater systems is Mother Nature, is trees, is land that is not developed. And so one of the things we're working on at the Board of Commissioners is updating our development code to ensure that the stormwater systems that are installed when new development comes in is of that bioretention, green infrastructure quality. We have a standard code right now that really is emphasis on, I'll just call it gray infrastructure, sometimes a little concrete box with a fence around it, right? And that's the code. And that's going to be dealing with volume to the most extent. But what I'm interested in, I think what we've talked about on the Board of Commissioners, is how do we incentivize development that enhances and preserves green space? Because that carbon sink, that water sink, sometimes is the forest. It is the trees. And so we need to be looking at development that incentivizes clustering of development, so we can either clear cut less forest, or if there is going to be a clear cut, that those enhancements that come back in are going to be treating not just the water quantity, but the water quality. And this, again, goes to the question of rain gardens and bioswales and other green infrastructure that we can build into not just new development, but certainly anything that the Public Works Department will be working on. And so, of course, many of y'all know that years ago, the county, and y'all voted on this, the Park and Green Space Bond Program, which invested in creating new parks and just buying land for conservation. You think about Entrenchment Creek Park or Constitution Lakes. In essence, buying wetlands and buying land near, throughout the county that is just there permanently for protection and conservation. Those are the other type of stormwater investments that we can make moving forward. And so as we move forward, I think we want to work on policies for developers, as well as our own stormwater infrastructure out there in the public system. And then hopefully opportunities in the future to invest more money in preserving land for the purposes of conservation and also future park, whether they're passive or active.
And thank you, Commissioner Terry, for that. There's so many things we could talk about, and maybe this always leads us to another town hall, because we have even adopted permeable pavers here, which, of course, instead of just your standard concrete driveways, these are squares that, of course, have grass in the middle, but it helps with your stormwater runoff. So all of these things come together. So maybe a town hall so that individuals understand all of the new advances in ecology that are associated with stormwater would be helpful. So we'll put a pin in that one. Now, from the audience, will the Stormwater Management Program repair stormwater county infrastructure on private property? Again, we will assist you with resources that we have. Reach out to our county commissioner, but on residential property, it is really a residential problem. Next question, how are individual homeowners who have old stormwater runoff systems that service the county in their yard going to benefit from this tax increase? System in place cannot accommodate the amount of water coming through them, and homeowners are being told it's their problem to solve. With these questions, sometimes it becomes a slippery slope, because I'm not sure until we do an assessment whether or not it is truly a county issue and whether or not the water was routed by the county. That is not to say your assessment isn't correct, but until we make ours, it is to be determined, because many developers and builders, when they built decades ago, there was no consideration for the torrential rainfall that we now receive. So if you have an issue, you will become one of that 2,500 calls we receive, and we will put you in queue. And I'm always going to be very painfully honest with you. and we will get someone out to do an assessment of what we see, and we will let you know exactly what the situation is and what the county can do to assist. So I don't want you to say yet it's the county's problem. We need to do an assessment. Next question, why are homeowners who have stormwater inlets in their yards required to update these systems even though the water directed through their yards is stormwater runoff coming from county-maintained systems? Now, if this is the case and it is a county-maintained system, then we need to take a look and do an assessment and determine what would be necessary on behalf of the county to redirect. But again, if you have an issue, you have to send us, your commissioners, an email so that we can route you appropriately. And that means our Director of Roads and Drainage, Miss Allen, Peggy Allen, who's sitting over in the corner, will start routing crews, and we will get by to make an assessment. But again, with the revenues that we'll be bringing in, it is to address these types of issues. Because currently we don't have the revenue to address all the issues we see. Now, one other thing that I'm going to say here, because in Public Works and Infrastructure, I think it's time we address this. Perhaps we may need to wait until the Stormwater Master Plan comes back. But it appears, many of you may be familiar, we now have a new program that allows individuals who have water issues on their property to apply. And we will assist you with the repair of your water system for water. Because what we've found is that our ongoing leaks and these water bills that people come down here and line up to talk about are the result of their inability to repair their water. They don't have the money. But because the county is experiencing the loss, and now we have water bills that have reached, in some cases, $5,000, $10,000 due to water loss, it is in the best interest of the county to help you help us, and we need to stop the hemorrhaging. So if you're receiving my newsletter, you will see the opportunity to apply for those funds. Maybe it's time we have the same type fund associated with stormwater.
It's a great idea, Madam Chair. And I'll just add something to the questioners, I think, getting at a couple issues that I've seen over the years. And sometimes it results if your street was resurfaced and maybe the milling didn't go down far enough, and maybe the curb line that, those old granite curb blocks, they used to be like this high and then now they're this high. And then sometimes some neighborhoods, they're like flush with the road. And so those are aspects, whether they're through our road paving and our SPLOST or through stormwater, because I have fielded calls from neighbors where they have pointed out where the curb line is so low that water is just rushing over the curb line and into their yard. And that is our problem, right? Because now the public water from everything uphill is now coming into someone's yard. And so sometimes it's a matter of going out there and just basically digging up the granite and sort of putting the thing back, or just making sure our paving contractors either mill low enough or just reset the curb lines. Familiar with our neighbors over on Willow Lane, it sort of starts off in DeKalb and then ends up in Decatur. And some neighbors have had, the water just kind of pour over the curb line, goes into the basement, it sort of just adds a lot more flow that otherwise would stay on the roadway. And so if you just going for a walk in your neighborhood one day, and maybe if you're out when it's raining with an umbrella, you might be able to kind of see how that water flows. And so feel free to just take a picture, take a video of that. If it's coming over the line, if it's going from the street into your yard, and that could be our problem. And so I think what Madam Chair said, just make sure you let us know about it, and then the team can go out and assess it and see about how we can fix that.
Also, one of the questions is, with the stormwater rate increase, can you be assured that the funds will be utilized for stormwater? Stormwater is an enterprise fund. And I know, again, we use a lot of terms that lay folks don't understand, but an enterprise fund is dedicated. We don't get to move it around like peas on our plate. Once it is put in a position, it will stay. So I just want to assure each and every one of you that the monies we collect for stormwater will be used to address the issues that we've talked about here this evening, because we've reached a critical state. And I'm going to pass it on over to Mr. Gruler at this time, because I don't know that we'll get through all this. We will not. I can tell you the truth. We will not. So all of you that have signed up to attend this town hall, we keep a dedicated list for each town hall that we do. Everyone will receive the reply to these questions. May take a week because you guys have given us quite a bit to work with, but you will be receiving replies to each and every question submitted. And go right ahead.
This was a really point out. So the first part is, how do stormwater fees differentiate from single-family residential to apartment complexes, malls, and other commercial property owners in DeKalb County? As part of that, as part of the billing process, they have gone through and looked at every developed property in the service area and identified single-family residential, and by that I mean just think traditional homes, single-family homes, and assigned that a billing rate of 1 billing unit. Then they went through and looked at all the attached residential, so think townhomes, condos, things of that nature, and they assigned them a half billing unit because they're a lot smaller than a residential home. And then finally, the other properties, so these are your commercial properties, churches, schools, things of that nature, that are typically much larger than a single-family home, and they are assessed individually. They look at how much impervious surface area is on that property, and then they say, how many homes is that equivalent to? So if it's the equivalent of 10 homes, they get a bill that is 10 times that size. So that's how the master count file is developed. And then the second part, and I really like the second part, is there a way that the new development projects be charged CIP front fees as a prerequisite to build? I don't see anybody here from the law department, so I can totally throw them under the bus. That's very similar to the idea of an impact fee. I think that would be a challenge there, and I would have to defer to the law department on that. But I really like that forward thinking there, and there are things that can be done. I think maybe not this exact approach, just because I think it starts to sound like an impact fee, and the developers have really written favorable laws there at the state level. But I think all of that is, kind of moving forward as we start talking about the master plan. All that needs to be considered in how that is approached. And then, if I may, one last thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And I realized what you guys saw tonight was the briefing that was given to the commissioners as a whole last week. There was one piece of information there that I think they would all know, but maybe it's not as obvious. This is a financial model, and a resolution that is before them, I guess tomorrow maybe, is for a rate increase. All those things we talked about as far as adding crews and contracts and all that stuff would still have to go through the normal budgeting process. So please stay engaged with your commissioners. If they approve the rate increase, that just changes the budget, or I shouldn't even say the budget. It changes the amount of revenue available to be budgeted. So continue to engage with your commissioners, because anything that we talked about there still has to be approved through the normal budgeting process.
Thank you so much for that. It's a whole lot going on up here, because now I've gotten myself in a bind because we have more questions than we have time. But I did want to say there's a question concerning what is the buyout for what is the budget for flood buyouts? When it's necessary to have a buyout in the county, we involve law, our legal department. And I won't say there is a budget, but we are not going to be unreasonable. It will be determined between that homeowner based upon the fair market value of the property, and a recommendation comes to us, and we make a decision at that time. There is also, is there a break for nonprofits and houses of worship? There is not. There's not. You owe for your water. And that's just the truth of the matter. There is no break for houses of worship or nonprofits. What are incentives for green infrastructure and less impervious surfaces? There are some incentives through a variety of green agencies. I would suggest that you Google online. The county personally, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, we are not offering any incentives. We had a low flow toilet program, and it is still on our website, so you can visit us there. But otherwise, and I read most everything, there is not a program that's associated with green infrastructure. Usually those deductions can be taken on the state and federal level, but you do need to do the research. Anything anyone want to add to those?
There is a credit program with utility. Now,
Okay.
if you were to develop a mall today, what you would have to do today is very different than what you would have done 30 years ago. So you have to put in that green infrastructure, you have to put in detention, you have to look at a number of things. And then obviously, the more they pave, the more they pay on the stormwater utility. So it's an incentive to them to pave as little as they need to accomplish their goals, or else they're just going to pay more in utility fees. And then moving forward, once they do get going, if they maintain that infrastructure, then there's a credit program that incentivizes them to keep it maintained and operating efficiently, so that those impacts in the future continue to be mitigated. So, yeah.
So we do have access to that program. It's located on our Public Works and Infrastructure. You go to Roads and Drainage, and then the drainage section, it actually has the booklet telling you more information about that program and how you could contact us to get additional information.
And let me say that Commissioner Terry and I, because he leads a lot of our green initiatives, of course, I'm very passionate about the trails and also the preservation of green space. I think we should commit ourselves to having a town hall that looks at green initiatives and introduces opportunities to DeKalb County residents to be more green conscious. So expect that town hall. We will organize it and get it on record. That said, I always want to be very mindful of time. I will ask at this point if there are any closing words from those who have sat here on the panel, and then we will dismiss. I want to thank you all, everyone who has joined us, for your interest in understanding, and I would ask for your understanding as we make very difficult decisions. But I also want everyone to understand that I was absolutely shocked that it had been almost 20 years since we had had a stormwater rate increase. Also, it was really important to me as the chair that you understand who is affected. Currently, only DeKalb County residents, as well as Stonecrest, and at the moment, Tucker, although they have voted to assume responsibility for their own stormwater program. At this point, it's still under our umbrella. So during this time, whatever affects you will continue to affect them until they duly assume full responsibility. And I will now defer to those amongst me.
Well, Madam Chair, I'd just thank you again for your leadership, Commissioner Terry. The staff, we really appreciate the opportunity to just come out and share what we do day in and day out, trying to come up with logical recommendations for the governing authority. We believe that we have come up with a sound recommendation in this instance. Hopefully we have articulated the need, and the investment that we're talking about is only going to make the county better. So often we say in the office, pay now or pay more later, and that is certainly the risk, but hopefully we've articulated well what the need is. Thank you.
If I can chime in real quick, I will as well, and thank everyone for their interest. It's an excellent opportunity for us that we quite often don't have to present this kind of information directly to, the constituents in the county. I would encourage everybody to remember a certain number, and that number is 13. And by 13, that represents the number of cents per day that this increase will run. It's really not a significant, it sounds like it's a big deal, but 13 cents a day is really all we're talking about.
And Mr. Lemke, I thank you for making the increase minimal. We should have started with you from the beginning. That said, I will not go any further. There are a lot of questions here. Bear with me. I don't have a large staff. Let me thank my chief of staff, and I know that Commissioner Terry also has assistance here this evening. We appreciate you all. We truly do our best as a Board of Commissioners to do what I truly believe is in the best interest of the people. And sometimes it does require making difficult decisions and increasing fees. But just know that we will do everything humanly possible to address the issues that we see that are associated with stormwater. So thank you all for coming, and have a great rest of the night.